damage hasn't been too bad, so they certainly are extremely grateful for that.
A grim picture of a state slipping very much into a dangerous situation. Look at that.
They'd stranded themselves along the breakwater at Bunbury's McKenna Point, but by the time authorities were able to reach them, many had drowned or died from injuries sustained.
A staggering death toll here. 3 blasts, very close to each other in terms of timing. 2 of them hitting key areas in Sana'a, the Yemeni capital, 2 key mosques, the Al-Badr Mosque and the Al-Hashush Mosque. Now, the technique used here, redolent really of Al-Qaeda's practices across the region. Suicide bombers entering each mosque, targeting worshippers, and then outside one, a car bomb exploded, and outside another suicide bomber exploded. Now, we're hearing from officials from the Houthi group here who seem to have been the predominant target. They are predominantly Shia, and these mosques targeted are predominantly from the Zaidi Muslim grouping. So a clear sectarian motive behind this. We're hearing from some Houthi officials the death toll may now be as high as 77, Brianna, with potentially 200 injured. Hospitals putting out an urgent appeal for blood on state TV. But let me wind you back as to why this is such a significant attack. For months now, there's been greater unrest than normal in the beleaguered country of Yemen. The government pushed aside by this group known as the Houthis, who are predominantly Shia, some say increasingly efficient because of the backing of Iran here. They've swept away the current government. They've put in their own, not recognised by the West, government of sorts. But we've seen the violence escalate here. And what the fear is potentially today is that these mosques targeted are from that Shia Houthi grouping. Potentially this may mark, if it turns out Al-Qaeda, a predominantly Sunni group, claim responsibility for the attacks, this may mark a worrying escalation in sectarian violence inside Yemen at a time too when the country is so close to collapse. It's barely got off the ground, frankly, in terms of being a functioning state for years now, but this lurch towards sectarian violence deeply troubling. At the same time too, we're hearing of warplanes above the presidential compound for the president, who's still recognised by the West, in the southern city of Aden. So much violence on so many fronts potentially here, but this staggering death toll at these 2 blasts in Sana'a and also one potentially lesser blast in the north of the country that happened about an hour or so afterwards, really causing deep fears of a further lurch towards sectarian conflict in Yemen and an even greater sense of collapse there, Brianna.
Really been just, Poppy, the last couple of years, maybe 2.5 to 3. This is a picture of just one out of several lakes. Reservoirs look like this too, just dwindling water. When rainfall is sporadic at best, when you have high temperatures, above average, and no snowfall, this is what happens. Now, this is 2013. Notice California, 0% exceptional drought. Let's go to September 2014, 58%. Now, we did have a little bit of help with some rainfall. This is December 2014. between. But watch, we're still seeing it increase again, back up to 39.9. We should have some good rainfall in the area. In fact, if you look what California for January and February into March should look like, and then compare it to what we've received already, that's just precipitation. Snowpack in the highest mountains is only at 12% of what it should be. But the drought's been continuing, not just for California, but the last 2 winters. It's been cold in the east. It's been warm in the west. In fact, this winter alone, 10,000 record lows in the east, but over 15,000 record highs. So without the rainfall, without the snow melt, this is going to continue to be a problem.
All right. Thank you so much. And when you look at those pictures, they really speak for themselves, painting a grim picture of a state slipping very much into a dangerous situation. Look at that. 2011 versus last year. California is the 7th largest economy in the world, not because of Silicon Valley or Hollywood, but because of agriculture. Virtually all of the almonds, artichokes, lemons, pistachios, and processed tomatoes grown in the U.S. come from that state's Central Valley. Let me bring in Jay Famulietti. He's a senior water scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, also professor of earth science at UC Irvine. Thank you for being here. You've written a lot about this, most recently an op-ed in the LA Times that got a lot of attention. You call water the new oil. That's how important this situation, how dire it is in California right now.
That's right. It is pretty bad. We, over the last few years, have lost something like 12 million acre feet of water per year for the last 3 or 4 years. That's more water than all 38 million Californians use every year. So it's a tremendous amount of water. A lot of it, about 2/3 of it, is from groundwater depletion, and the groundwater is used to support agriculture. So we're really in a very, very difficult situation.
So what can you do? Because what the farmers are doing there, because they have to provide for their crops, is that they're drilling up all of this groundwater. And up until very recently, there was nothing to regulate how much they could take, and it's harder to, it gets depleted at some point.
That's right.
I guess what I'm asking is, what can be done to stem this?
Well, we did in California pass new legislation, thankfully, and what an upside of the drought is that we're able to get this passed. And that legislation hopefully will help slow the flow. But one of the issues is that it's going to take a few, water legislation is complicated. It's going to take a few decades for that new legislation to be implemented. And so my private fear is that we may run out of groundwater in some places before the legislation has a chance to kick in.
Can you paint the picture for everyone watching of what that scenario would look like and how the average person would feel it?
Well, I think the future of California is one that is not quite apocalyptic, but we'll have some major changes. We'll still have agriculture, I think, but we'll be planting different things that are more efficient. I think the message is we'll have to evolve towards more efficiency.
Major towns have thankfully been spared any serious damage from Cyclone Nathan this morning, which crossed the far north Queensland coast earlier this morning and has now been downgraded from Category 4 to Category 3. Here is the very latest for you. The destructive core of the cyclone made landfall between Cape Melville and Cape Flattery, north of Cooktown. Nathan took a slight turn to the north at the last minute, sparing those populated areas from the full force. The residents are being warned of a dangerous storm tide, which is expected to flood low-lying areas. That's expected around 9 a.m. For the latest, we're joined live by Andrew Lofthouse in Cooktown, and we have Ashlyn Krukellis at Emergency Services Headquarters in Brisbane. First to Andrew. Andrew, what's the latest there? How is it looking?
Well, Sylvia, just as you crossed, we're getting again some pretty hefty gusts of these winds, although generally they have eased and it's really the rain that has set in. But now with a little more light around town, we're able to see the damage that has been done in Cooktown. And we had a look at the hospital where their main storage shed, where they have all of their maintenance gear, their mowers and tools and everything, has just had a large part of its roof just peeled back by the wind. Now, it suffered the same fate in Cyclone Ita a year ago, just in that exposed parts of the town. So they really copped it there with the damage to their shed over at the hospital. Now, that is just next to or near the evacuation centre. They've had 63 people in overnight, and they will be wanting to get back to their homes as soon as they can to see what damage there's been there. We have had some minor window breakage, some minor roof damage, but we've also seen one house with its entire fence blown completely off and across the road. The SES is out and about assessing the level of damage in various areas, so I think we'll see some more signs, as we've seen at the hospital, of just how it did bear the brunt of the strong winds in the early hours of this morning. But easing off, Sylvia, but the rain certainly has set in now.
Yeah, that footage from Cooktown just into our newsroom, so no doubt we'll get more of an idea of the full extent of the damage shortly. But right now, let's go to Ashlyn, who is at Emergency Services headquarters. Ashlyn, what's the latest information you're receiving there?
Has escaped virtually unscathed.
Well, Sylvia, all the disaster management experts here have just had a meeting with the Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk, and she will be coming in here soon to give us the very latest. But someone in that meeting just said to me that they're describing the feeling here as one of relief, that the damage hasn't been too bad. So they certainly are extremely grateful for that, but they will wait and see what happens over the next few hours as the heavy rain continues and that high tide happens at 9 o'clock, which is, of course, the next thing that is happening. We actually have the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk coming in here now, so we'll let you listen to the latest from her.
Well, good morning. We are very relieved with the current situation in relation to Cyclone Nathan. Cyclone Nathan did cross the coast north between Cape Flattery and Cape Melville, and at the moment there are no reported injuries. However, we still do need people to be safe. We'll be making sure that we examine the area to see if there's any impacts on the local communities of Hopevale and Cooktown, but our priority still is people's safety, and there may be power lines that are down. So once again, we've shown how resilient our communities can be, and we are very thankful that Cyclone Nathan did cross to that northern section. We were very concerned yesterday that it could swing further down south and have a huge impact on those local communities. But the Queensland Disaster Management Group will be meeting at 10 a.m. this morning. By that time, we should have some indication of the impacts of Cyclone Nathan in relation to that region.
Well, I'm joined here by the Director of the Northern Territory Emergency Services, Andrew Warden. Andrew, can you tell us what the latest is on the evacuation that began just less than an hour ago?
Sure, Dan. Last night, the Territory Emergency Management Council made a decision that evacuation plan will be endorsed, and the plan was activated in the early hours of this morning. So the first plane is now taken off from Darwin, and that's the start of the evacuation. And the objective is to get everybody off that island and safely back to Darwin by the end of day.
And what are the logistics from here? There are several hundred people who need to be evacuated from Warrawee. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There's about 420 all up. So a series of commercial flights have been organised. The Transport Group, under our emergency plan, has been working all night to secure that. And that movement, as we said, has just started.
Yesterday, the Police Commissioner said it was around a 12-hour turnaround. That means that the last planes will be taking off late this afternoon when gales are expected. This is going to be tight.
Look, the advice from the Bureau is that the worst case scenario at this stage is gales could appear around 5 o'clock this afternoon. So the message to the public is this is a well-rehearsed, because we did this a month ago with Cyclone Lam, it's a well-rehearsed, calm and measured response, and we will get everyone off that island and safely back to Darwin today.
And you've got the resources and everything that you need to be able to make this happen?
We're very well supported. This is a time when all NT government agencies, police, fire and emergency services pull together, activate plans, work together, as has been happening all night. And we're confident that we have all the resources, all the skill and all the planning to make this effective.
வர்த்தக நகரமான டக்னாவில் 2,50,000 மக்கள் வசிக்கின்றனர். சிலி நாட்டிலிருந்து 35 கிலோமீட்டர் தொலைவில் டக்னா உள்ள நிலையில் சிலியின் புட்ரே நகரில் இந்த நிலநடுக்கம் மையம் கொண்டிருந்ததாகவும் பூமிக்கடியில் 128.1 கிலோமீட்டர் ஆழத்தில் நிலநடுக்கம் ஏற்பட்டதாகவும் அமெரிக்க புவியியல் ஆய்வு மையம் உறுதிப்படுத்தியுள்ளது. இந்த நிலநடுக்கத்தின் தாக்கம் டக்னா நகரத்திலிருந்து 105 கிலோமீட்டர் தூரம் வரையிலும் சிலியில் உள்ள மிகப்பெரிய நகரமான அரிகா மற்றும் புட்ரே ஆகிய இடங்களிலும் உணரப்பட்டது. எனினும் நிலநடுக்கம் காரணமாக சுனாமி எச்சரிக்கை எதுவும் விடப்படவில்லை.
Four whales have been rescued and were together herded into deeper water this afternoon. It followed a massive rescue effort by dozens of volunteers to try to save 20 of the animals, which were reported to authorities at about 8 o'clock this morning by a fisherman. They had stranded themselves along the breakwater at Bunbury's McKenna Point, but by the time authorities were able to reach them, many had drowned or died from injuries sustained by being pushed against the rocks. Altogether, 12 whales have perished, their carcasses dragged ashore by earth-moving equipment to be assessed by wildlife officers who will try to ascertain what caused the pod to beach themselves in this tiny harbour.
Now, people are upset about this video. We've been showing it to you. And tonight, people are planning to protest outside of New Haven's police department.
We first gave you a look at that last week. The teenagers that are being thrown to the ground happened right after the St. Patrick's Day parade in New Haven. News 8's Erin Logan is on the latest tonight watching what's happening. She's live for us in New Haven with more. Erin?
Darren, Ann, this is one of two protests that News 8 has learned about. Today's event not planned by the victim's family, but a community activist named Barbara Fair. She says New Haven cannot become another Ferguson, saying, in fact, that we cannot afford to find a teen lying in the street and we're forced to do nothing but bury him or her. Now take a look again at that video we keep showing you. Fair says today's message is to get, quote, brutal and out of control police out of the NHPD. News 8 did speak on camera to Tiandria Cornelius' brother and cousin, who say she suffered a number of injuries, a swollen face, black eyes, hurt shoulder, and a concussion. But neither the family nor city officials will say why exactly the Amistad High School student was arrested during last Sunday's St. Paddy's Day parade. Also, as of last check, the family still has not filed a formal complaint with the police, but the NHPD says they're thoroughly reviewing the circumstances of this arrest. We did learn just now that the family has contacted a lawyer. And again, this protest today is scheduled to take place at 5:30 outside the New Haven PD. We will, of course, keep you updated throughout the hour.
Watching ABC 7 News at 5 on your side.
Police want to know if there are any other victims after two international students looking for jobs as housekeepers were sexually assaulted.
The women were lured from the Ballston Commons Mall in Arlington to Burke. 7 on your side's Fighting Back investigator Jennifer Donellan is live in Burke. She's got the latest on the investigation. Jennifer?
Well, Leon, Allison, this is an absolutely gorgeous neighborhood here in Burke, Virginia. Hard for residents here to imagine the allegations that now stand against at least one couple in one of the homes behind me, and that is that 2 international students were raped inside one of these houses. Let's get to some video. According to Fairfax County Police and a search warrant, this began back on March 8th. These 2 women traveled from Mongolia just 2 months prior. They went to the mall in search of jobs. And that's where it's been reported that they met another woman from Mongolia who said, hey, I know of a house cleaning job in Burke, Virginia. The 2 young women, ages 20 and 31, were brought back here to this neighborhood in Burke, Virginia. And that's where police believe they were drugged and then sexually assaulted. The big concern for police is there's information that there may be other victims who may be afraid to come forward.
They may have had negative experiences with law enforcement in their home countries and may be frightened. Perhaps they have citizenship concerns, and so they're afraid to call police. So there very well could be other victims involved in a case like this, and our detective wants to hear from them if so.
And Fairfax County Police stressing at this hour that any victim who wants to come forward and tell their story to please do so, free from any harm, that the police want to hear what happened to them as they pursue this very active investigation. Reporting live from Burke, I'm Jennifer Donnellan, ABC 7 News.
There are doubts all around a U.S. nuclear deal with Iran, starting with that country's supreme leader who must sign off on any agreement. At a speech over the weekend in front of a crowd chanting "Death to America," Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei agreed, condemning the economic sanctions on his people. Yes, death to America, Khamenei told the audience, because America is the original source of this pressure. All the more reason, the White House says, to strike a deal.
Do those comments give this White House any pause about moving forward with a nuclear deal with that country?
Jim, I can tell you that I think those kinds of comments only underscore why it is so critically important that the United States and the international community succeed in preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And the best way for us to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon is sitting down at the negotiating table.
There are also skeptics in both parties on Capitol Hill, where 367 lawmakers signed a letter to the president saying Congress must be convinced that the deal's terms foreclose any pathway to a bomb, and only then will Congress be able to consider permanent sanctions relief.
How many of you believe the Iranians in the past have been trying to build a nuclear bomb, not a peaceful power program? Okay, so we start with the proposition they're liars.
CIA Director John Brennan argued the pressure is on Iran, saying he's confident the U.S. intelligence community will have a good understanding of their nuclear activity.
So if they decide to go down that route, they know that they will do so at their peril.
White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough promised a Jewish American group the administration won't accept a bad deal.
Any deal would last for more than a decade, setting back Iran's program for far longer than would military strikes.
That is, the president cautioned, if a breakthrough can be reached.
Frankly, they have not yet made the kind of concessions that are, I think, going to be needed for a final deal to get done. But they have moved, and so there's the possibility.
As for the Ayatollah's death to America comments, administration officials are suggesting those kinds of remarks are aimed at an Iranian domestic political audience. What matters, official caution, is what they agreed to at the bargaining table.
Well, it looks like severe weather season is finally about to awaken. It's been so quiet so far this year. I mean, it's March 24th, and we haven't had a tornado in the month of March so far. I mean, that's just crazy, almost unheard of. Well, we'll have a chance at some over the next couple of days, even though that's not the primary threat. Now, Tuesday, kind of the bullseye is going to be Springfield, Missouri, but the threat goes all the way down to parts of eastern Oklahoma, Tulsa, all the way up to Kansas City, and even out towards St. Louis. Damaging wind and hail is going to be the main threat with any severe storms, but I mentioned we could see a tornado or two. Then Wednesday, kind of a similar area that's under that severe threat. It gets a little bit farther toward the south to include Oklahoma City and Dallas.
Shiite Houthi rebels now in control of the international airport in the southwestern city of Taiz. The UN envoy warning that Yemen is at, quote, the edge of civil war. This sectarian violence between Shiite rebels and a Sunni majority government spreading across the country. where Houthis, who control the capital of Sana'a and areas of the north, are now advancing south into Taiz, the country's third largest city. The mounting unrest pushing the US military to pull out over the weekend, following the US embassy evacuation last month. ISIS claiming responsibility for this suicide attack on 2 mosques on Friday. More than 130 killed, hundreds more injured.
We're seeing extremists try to capitalize on the chaos and instability inside of Yemen to carry out these acts of violence.
The nation now in an especially perilous position, caught between the Houthis' violent rivalry with the Sunni AQAP terrorists, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. But now growing concerns. The US withdrawal is a serious blow to the counter-terrorism mission.
Without good intelligence stopped plots against the homeland. Without that intelligence, we cannot effectively stop it.
This region, home to violent Al-Qaeda offshoots, the terrorist organizations responsible for plotting several attacks against Americans, including the 2000 attack on the USS Cole, leaving 17 sailors dead, and the underwear bomber attempt on the US airliner in 2009.
Even before NASA's Dawn spacecraft settled into orbit around dwarf planet Ceres, scientists saw a most puzzling image. While still 29,000 miles away, Dawn spotted 2 bright spots at the bottom of a large crater February 19th. At the recent Lunar and Planetary Science Conference, Dawn-led investigator Andreas Matthews gave a talk on the probe's early results. According to Planetary Society blogger Emily Lakdawala, he said the bright spots could be, quote, some form of outgassing. Matthews said parts of the spots remain visible above the crater's rim as it rotates, suggesting a plume rising above the surface. But a plume of what? In early 2014, the European Space Agency's Herschel telescope detected water vapor on Ceres, so we could be looking at an icy volcano spewing water vapor. Dawn's orbit keeps it on Ceres' dark side until mid-April, so definite answers will have to wait at least until then.
ISIS is taking its war of terror to the American homeland, or trying to. An online campaign is targeting 100 specific members of the U.S. military in 11 states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Today, the Pentagon asked local police to help protect these servicemen and women. We have more now from National Security Correspondent David Martin.
Most of the military personnel on the hit list are from the Air Force and Navy, the 2 services which have been conducting the air campaign against ISIS. Some of them served aboard aircraft carriers launching strikes over Iraq. Others are based at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, home of the B-1 bomber, which has been carrying out the most visible strikes of the war, the ones around the Syrian town of Kobani. ISIS has no way to defend against those strikes, which by last count have hit more than 5,300 targets and killed more than 8,500 fighters. Instead, it fired off a salvo from what is proving to be its most potent weapon, social media, the eruption of grisly internet videos and Twitter feeds that spew into cyberspace each day. The hit list first appeared on a Polish site frequently used by ISIS as a propaganda platform. From there, it quickly made its way to YouTube, giving the names, home addresses, and photographs, which we've blurred, of 100 U.S. military personnel ISIS wants killed. Investigators from the FBI and the armed services are trying to determine how each serviceman or woman ended up on the list, but it appears to be drawn from publicly available sources such as news articles, Facebook postings, and phone directories. All the servicemen, some of whom weren't even involved in the air campaign, have been notified and offered security briefings, and local police have been asked to step up patrols in the neighborhoods where they live.
Scott, to give you an idea of how unprepared the military is for this social media warfare, the Pentagon did not think to ask YouTube to take that hit list off its website until after a reporter for CBS asked the question, has anybody contacted you two?
David Martin reporting for us from the Pentagon. David, thank you.
The potentially deadly dengue fever has reached epidemic proportions in 1 in 10 cities across Brazil, according to the Ministry of Health, with São Paulo state the worst affected. Over 500 municipalities have registered a high number of cases, some of them significantly above levels defined as epidemic by the World Health Organization.
The symptoms include a really terrible pain at the back of the eyes, painful joints, and an intense fever. I went to see a doctor quickly, and it was found that I had the severe hemorrhagic form. It was awful. I couldn't work for a month.
Since January, Brazil has registered 224,000 cases, 162% higher than the same period last year. While those infected normally get a severe fever, it can develop into a potentially fatal hemorrhagic form.
This epidemic is a result of extremely hot temperatures over the last 2 years. Recently, it's been unbearably hot and humid, but we've been through dengue epidemics before, and we've managed to overcome them, but only by getting the whole population to act.
The mosquito that transmits dengue fever thrives in Brazil's tropical climate. Just one person bitten and infected could mean the virus spreading to the entire community. With 1 in 10 municipalities in Brazil now facing an epidemic, the government is again asking people to help it to reduce accumulations of stagnant water. Just a small amount, all that's needed for the mosquito to breed and to continue spreading this potentially deadly virus. A groundbreaking vaccine developed in Brazil may be a game changer in the future. It's currently awaiting a green light from the government. But for now, the message for Brazilians is this: avoid getting bitten and reduce the number of places the mosquitoes can breed. Ben Taverner, Press TV, São Paulo.